Hello everybody, welcome to Planet Coaster 2 and welcome back to Le Jardin Magique. This is our magical theme park based on a made-up animation studio with made-up IPs and set in a made-up country in Northern Europe. And on today's episode, we are going to be checking out this very whimsical, very joyous and fun family thrill coaster. It's sort of riffing on its legally distinct Tank Engine and Friends. It's a little bit Casey Jr. It's a little bit inspired by Big Bear at Dollywood. So yeah, let's do the usual thing and jump into a series of save files where I'll sort of take you through my thinking and the whole process of putting this together. So, it all begins around the time I was finishing off the Europa coaster here, or I should say finishing off the building I was doing for that episode. I don't know what happened exactly, but I just had the idea to come and build this train. And me and SP had talked way back in like 2024 when I first came up with the concept for the park. At one point I'd said to SP like, I'd quite like to do something that's vaguely Thomas and Friendsy, you know, in that it's about a sort of little train and his mates. And we talked a little bit as well about Casey Jr. at Disneyland Paris. I think SP floated the idea of it being a kind of a Western themed ride that would have kind of dark ride indoor sections and stuff. At some point, I don't remember exactly when, I had the idea to do it as more of a kind of alpine, vaguely alpine, nondescript alpine, let's call it. So it's sort of a mixture of French, Swiss, Austrian, German kind of alpine vibes. And in a similar way to how the park's not set in any particular country. You know, this ride is not set in any particular country, and that allows me to just sort of pull from a mishmash of, cultural and aesthetic kind of influences. Yeah, as I was saying, at some point when I was working on the Europa coaster, I just thought, man, I need a break from this for a bit, so I'm going to go and do something else. And I decided for whatever reason to start working on this little train here. It's fairly simple, really. Most of these bits here are just toy box pieces and support pieces. You know, we've got this plastic pipe for the nose. Top of the chimney here is this cog piece. The main bit of the chimney is this. Well, it is actually a chimney. Yeah, it's very simple. And then on the frontage, I went with this Vekoma train, partly as I was saying in the intro, because I thought Big Bear looks really cool. Obviously, the coaster itself is not hugely inspired by Big Bear. There was also a little bit of influence here from one of the many Vekomas at Energylandia, which has a similar children's train theme, and it's got this kind of front car with the engine. You might be thinking this looks like a bit of a health hazard, and I did eventually decide that was the case. As you'll see at a later point, I eventually trimmed this roof back. I think it was Redline on Bro Nation also pointed out that these windows might be a bit small, so I also go back later and make these windows larger. And at this point in time, you can see I've got the first whip of the layout in. This whole first bit here kind of stays very similar up to the top of this hill here, basically. The second half of the coaster I'll show you as we go through the saves, but this took me quite a long time to settle on a layout that I was happy with. I basically ended up positioning the coaster in such a way that I was kind of free to just noodle with everything past this point spatially without having too much effect on the rest of what I was working on. So, jumping forward a little bit in time, you will see that some progress was made, and at this point I had finished working on the rapids, as you can see here, and I wanted to start expanding in this direction here past Le Siège. An idea I'd had at some point was for a top spin ride called Trebuchet, just because the motion of the ride goes really well with that thematically, and obviously that fits in really well with Le Siège and this whole kind of slightly medieval castle vibe that we've got in this little area here. It's generally like really simple, obviously, it's just the ride with a little queue in front of it. And like I say, simple bit of theming. We've got some wood beam jetty posts and this boatyard log which has got the ropes tied around it. I really love this piece, it's got a really nice texture on it, looks really nice. And yeah, as you can see, various cogs and wood and rope theming basically, but not completely covering every surface. I sort of wanted it to look themed, but not like they'd spent, you know, millions and millions of dollars theming the top spin, just enough to kind of tie it in with the area. And then we've also got this little facade tying off the end here, which externally looks like a separate building, but internally it will just be an extension of the Armory gift shop here. And I think at this point I'm sort of thinking I may add an exit on this side depending on what happens here. I'm leaving that option open for the future. At this point I've kind of committed to the position of this coaster over here. Part of the reason it's here is purely just to get the sight line here of this station building as you're coming along the pathway, and then it also just made sense to me for this coaster, for the layout itself to be kind of out the back here on the other side. At a later point, as part of the kind of rejigging of the backside of the coaster here, the layout gets tweaked slightly to create enough space for a service road to run in here between these two coasters. Yeah, as I said, the main idea was really just for this station to be the main sight line as you come up along this path, and another part of that was just to have this really subtle kind of gradient here where it's very slightly raised up from this area down here as you sort of walk along this way. and that just sort of places it up very slightly so that as you're coming along here, it really looks prominent. And obviously, as we've got this slightly kind of alpine theme, it makes sense for it to be up a little hill, I guess. And then yeah, as for the station building itself, this is another thing that evolves slightly as I continue to work on it. This was the very first iteration, and the design was based on a sketch that I did, which I'll chuck on screen now. After I'd built that initial custom train, I was then having all sorts of other ideas, so at some point I drew a couple of ideas for this station so that when I came back to work on this, I would have something to kind of go off. And yeah, the idea was just for it to look like a quaint sort of alpine train station slash house. It's sort of vaguely inspired by some kind of Studio Ghibli designs, and I just mainly wanted it to look kind of playful, slightly cartoonish. We've got this sort of stonework around the bottom of the building, and it's all just made out of the 3D font comma piece. Likewise for this archway, it's also made out of the commas. And then we've got the classic gingerbread icing, which I'm using for these kinds of... I don't know if there's a name for this sort of decorative painting that you see on the sides of a lot of buildings in certain parts of Europe. Another big part of the kind of aesthetic of this whole thing was that I just wanted it to be very colourful, very playful, lots of flowers. This is where most of the park's flower budget is going. So far, most of the rest of what I've used is greenery. There are a couple of other places where there's kind of shrubs and bushes that would be, you know, relatively low maintenance compared to flower beds. But yeah, on the whole, it's mostly green. I do have the odd little bed that's got a hydrangea or a rhododendron or whatever. But yeah, for the most part, most stuff has been green. Yeah, I really wanted this coaster to kind of have the flower budget, and the idea is that the rest of this area will also be generally quite sort of pleasant, well-maintained garden sort of area. So yeah, let's jump forward again. So at this point, as you can see, things have changed. We've now got a name for the ride in. I was sort of looking through various kind of Austrian names. I thought it would be fun to have an Austrian name. At one point I was thinking Gunther, and then I don't know, yeah, I saw Florian in a list of Austrian names. I was like, no, that is perfect. So we've got the name, it's Florian et ses amis, Florian and friends. The idea with this little entrance building here was to sort of carry on the sort of slightly cartoonish train station inspired vibes. Once again, this roof here is the commas again. Those commas are coming in clutch on this whole build, to be honest. And a lot of this structure here in particular wouldn't be possible without the scaling mod. Things like these little stained glass windows, for example. You cannot scale the windows down to 4% in vanilla. But yeah, it just really goes a long way to selling the whole kind of look. The sign, as usual, is just made of art shapes, basically. For the kind of steam coming out of the chimney here, got these classic kind of panel pieces. Some of them are actually clouds, and then some of them are actually bushes that have been recolored like clouds, but then, yeah, altogether you get this nice kind of puffy smoke coming out of the chimney there. As you can see at this point then, I've also started roughing out the first part of the queue, again continuing with the kind of flower beds, and it's nice and colourful. These bushes here, this has been my new goat gardening piece. It's this rose bush, which obviously comes in a flowerless and a flowered variety. It doesn't look anything like roses to me. I don't know if you've ever seen roses in real life, but this is not what roses look like. But I don't think that matters too much, obviously. It just looks like any kind of generic flower, as is the case with most of the flowers in the game. They're named particular things, but most of them, you know, like, to me, this flower bed here, where they don't even try to tell you what kind of flowers they are, these could be any number of things. But yeah, anyway, the rose bushes. So like this massive bush here is actually just made of lots of these rose bushes kind of rotated to form a sort of vaguely spherical shape. And then we've got the ones with the flowers bedded into the top of it there to give it that kind of look. And then likewise for this hedge here, this is all just made of, as you can see here, each chunk of it is made of 3 pieces of the flowerless rose bush. And then that's just sort of rotated in a tube to get that kind of look. And it's this kind of like, this nice kind of simple hedgerow that we're sort of missing a lot of. Again, I feel like the juniper trees make really nice kind of generic hedgerows. Just looks like some kind of evergreen hedgerow when you mash them together like this. It's like subtly visually different from the rose bushes, enough that you get kind of a nice effect here. The front of the station here, I've started tweaking. I think at some point I posted a whip on Bro Nation, and Jonty from Geekism chimed in saying that he thought, I mean, his complaint in specifically was about the icing pieces. You know, there's basically no way that I'm redoing these patterns using custom pieces, although you could obviously do that. What I ended up doing is reworking the icing pattern on the front here, desaturating the colours a little bit. I also swapped the lamps out for these custom ones that I made, which use these bottle lamps, which because of the update have all turned off, but you know, when they're lit up I think they look convincingly like lamps. And then, you know, the rest of it's just a variety of mostly toy box pieces, actually, toy box and sorcery pack stuff. Got the bottom of the armillary pillar there. So yeah, the custom lamps are doing a lot of heavy lifting. And then I was also trying to then kind of bring this slightly alpine, Austrian, sort of slightly ornate frontage to the gable here. I don't end up keeping this exact thing. I wasn't really satisfied with how much extra detail there is on these Viking pieces that make it look kind of a very specific type of vibe. You know, they've got all these animals and little bits of detail on that, you know, you can hide, but I ended up doing something slightly different, which I'll show you shortly. So yeah, obviously, sorry Jonty, I didn't end up removing the icing, but you did spur me to come back and take another look at this, and I think it does end up being quite improved from what it looked like previously. And then the rest of the queue ends up getting tweaked a little bit after this point as well, but the general shape is there, where you have this bit that sort of loops around this tree, then we go through a cattle pen, we have this sort of switch back here, then it loops around down here, and then it's going to come into another cattle pen, and then we've got this kind of classic rampway leading up into the station itself. To build this ramp, I actually made liberal use of the new enhanced move tool mod from distance, and this is a really useful mod. It enhances the move tool, as the name would suggest. As you can see from my move tool now, we've got this extra row of tools, and I'm not going to talk about all of them in this video today, but I will just show off this one particular feature that was really useful for this. As you can see here, this whole kind of railing system here is constructed from this one little chunk here that I built, which is a meter long, and as you can see, if I bring up the tool here, snap distance is set to 1 meter. But what you can also see happening here is that because the move tool is very slightly off axis with this group of pieces, when I try to move it using the default gizmo, it does eventually come out of line. So if I was building this manually by hand, I would have to, you know, move it along, and then for each one I'd have to come in here and kind of nudge it back to where it needs to be, and then I'd need to move it up to be in roughly the right position. But with the new move tool, all of that's a thing of the past, because let me just delete this for the purposes of demonstration. What you can do now is if you sort of set this up like this, your one little chunk, and then we can use this move pivot to object function, which basically allows us to move the gizmo to be aligned to any single object in the vicinity, or you can actually use, as you can see here, you can use coaster track as well, which is obviously super useful for custom sporting. But yeah, in this particular case here, I've pre-aligned this long wooden beam to the slope of the ramp here. So if we then use that for our move tool, we're now controlling these pieces using this alignment. And then we can basically just move this railing up and down this slope perfectly. And obviously, if we set it to 1 meter, then because it's a 1 meter chunk, we then get this perfectly repeating railing all the way up here to the top, and it's just mad how much quicker that is than it would have been before the mod. It just would be so much fiddling, so much time figuring out, getting the heights. This way, each of these is at the exact correct height, exact right distance from each other, cleanly going all the way up the slope. So yeah, it's just amazing. As I said, there are numerous other features that this mod has, but that one in particular I'm just in love with. So that's the enhanced move tool mod. I really recommend it. And then yeah, for the station, we've got this little alpine kind of ticket booth that's very much carrying over the vibe. And then I didn't talk about this in the last section, but yeah, the back half of the station here is covered with this kind of glass roof here. And this was really just partly to break up the structure so that we didn't have a solid roof, covering the entire length of this platform. And also just because, train stations often have these kind of glass roofs, and it just adds a nice bit of visual variety to the structure. It allows us to bring in a new colour. And of course, as I've talked about before, glass just creates nice lighting moments in this game, plays into the advantages of this game's engine. As for the layout itself, at this point the layout has changed, as you will see, but this is not the final layout. I think I was kind of happy with this layout. I really like the way that it has these two different points where it crosses over what we now have in the back half, which is a very short tyre launch. But part of my problem with this layout was that it turned into right turn the ride. So, you come up here, you turn right, cross over the track, you turn right, you come over this little airtime hill, you turn right, you go back over the launch, you turn right into the station. It was just like too much turning right. So I bring you now into the present day with the final layout of the ride and all the little bits and bobs that have been updated that I can talk you through. I'll just show you the layout first. So as you can see, the first half of the layout, as I said, it hasn't really changed. And you go into the tyre launch here, and instead of turning right, you turn left. And then it's, it's a bit of an S-bend. It's another little helix around the bottom here. And then it's a sort of windy, wavy curves all the way back across the launch and into the brake run. So yeah, overall the ride is really just kind of a series of fairly gentle helices and little airtime hills. The ride never goes above, I think it's 32 miles an hour, the max speed, which is probably happening just after the launch here. But yeah, that's the layout. I'm actually just going to jump into Tejikam here, back down at this end so I can walk you through the area as it currently looks. So yeah, this little facade on the right here is now called the Forgeron or Forge. We've got the anvil. Obviously this is still all very whip, but I did indeed end up opening this up on this side here. And then we've just got the beginnings of a little seating area here. Added a little bit of a cover into the queue here for the trebuchet. And then on the left here we've got the very beginnings of what I'm going to build next, which is I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But yeah, as for the actual ride area here, we've now got these custom lamps everywhere. These are sort of adapted from the ones on the front of the station. And you may notice the sound, and you probably spotted them when I was looking at the layout a minute ago. But we've now got these little animals everywhere. These are the friends of Florian, obviously in Thomas and Friends. I think most of his friends, or all of his friends, are other kind of, other train engines and other vehicles of various kinds. But in this case, I wanted it to be that his friends were all kind of alpine animals, various alpine animals. So we've got the sheep here. The sheep also appears here in the ride sequence. And then over here, we've got his friend the cow, who moves, and you get a little cowbell sound as you go past. And then over this side of the hill, we've got the little alpine goat. And finally, we've got a sheep stuck down a well over here, which I thought it's obviously kind of tragic, but quite amusing. And the facade is now in its final form. As you can see, I removed those sort of curvy Viking pieces, and they've all been replaced with these pointy vertical decoratives. I don't know what they're called, but you see these on a lot of Austrian buildings, especially in Tyrol. So I thought that would be a really nice touch. And then I raised up the clock tower a little bit and made it slightly smaller. So yeah, it's interesting how relatively minor changes to the proportions of a building like that can have kind of subtle but strong effects, I think. Like, I'm really pleased with how this looks now. I'm very chuffed. So I'll just walk you through the queue quickly. We've got some custom signage on the right here. I still need to create a template for a sort of ride entrance sign with all the safety information stuff on it that I can place outside all the rides, but I have not done that yet. In this little cattle pen area here, you can see I've succumbed to faking the 1 meter wide cattle pen as it would probably be in real life. Obviously that means that she's technically walking the wrong way down that aisle. Oh, he's walking the right way. So, visually it's a little bit busted, but I think this is a good compromise to me. I really like the way this looks with the 1 meter wide queue here in the cattle pen. And if that means that people kind of clip through it a little bit or are walking through it slightly oddly, that's fine with me. The little cutback on the queue here is covered with a sort of fake train depot. And we've got this little carriage sort of sitting outside of it. Obviously this is really simple. The queue just comes down here. You get a really cool view of Le Siège from here actually, which I think is fun. And then it's very simple. We just sort of come down here. We've got another little cattle pen here. God, it's pretty busy actually. People really like this coaster. Don't mind me, please. Sorry. Just jumping ahead to show everyone around. We come up into the station itself. As you can hear, the tunes are pumping. The vibes are immaculate. We've got a little bit of signage. I brought some of the artworks from the gift shop on the main street over. We've got a little clock. I've been really enjoying using these toy box pieces to do any kind of decorative wood, and you could obviously go much more detailed than this if you were inclined to, but like this Bon Voyage sign here as well is made out of those wood block pieces, as well as these decorations on the front here are upside down trees, and then this little, I think this is meant to be a bush block they call it. I'm finding those super useful. And yeah, otherwise the rest of the interior does what it says on the tin really. I wanted to lean a little bit more into sort of sound stuff in this area in general, so obviously we've got the music pumping out of the station, the ride has got sound effects as you will have heard, we've got the sheep and the cow and the goat and everything, and then every time the train leaves the station we have a little choo-choo that goes off, which I just think is a really nice, fun little touch, which just adds a nice little moment as you're on the ride and from off-ride as well. I just think it's very pleasant. And then as we come around this first turnaround here, the last little thing I want to show you in this area is the pigeonnier, which is the pigeon, the pigeonary, and there's an actual real pigeon landing on it. That is beautiful timing. But yeah, you see these all over the world, really. It's just like a little place where pigeons would be stored for whatever they used to use pigeons for. And I think in the show that this ride is based on, these would be another one of Florian's friends, the alpine pigeons. Everyone's familiar with the alpine pigeon. When I first started this project, like, one of the things I had in my head was that there were going to be these kind of interactive things around the park, and it's actually something that I've failed to do completely up until this point. But you'll see here, as we approach the button, we have the option to play sequence. So if I just push this button here, we get this little sequence where the pigeons do a little dance. And yeah, it's really simple, but I'm super chuffed with how this came out. As you can see underneath here, I had to go fully into the taggy mines to create these subtle little movement animations for the pigeons. It wasn't that difficult to set up once I watched Taggy's video several times. And I think just to have these fun little interactive moments, it's like totally worth it. The hard carry on this structure is this toy figure foot piece for the roof tiles. That's something I discovered relatively recently. Just works really nicely for this kind of cartoony vibe that we've got in this area. The little pigeons themselves are also made almost entirely of these same foot pieces. The body of the pigeon is also one of those. Obviously the head and the eyes are heart-shaped spheres, but the beak is also the same piece. So that's quite fun that I've gotten a decent amount of mileage there out of just that one piece. But yeah, I really like the idea that you might be coming around the corner on the right here and somebody may have recently activated this. I should probably put a coin slot on here or something just to set up the idea that you wouldn't just be able to come up and push this. Maybe you can tell me in the comments. I don't know if this sort of thing would normally be charged for. It probably would be on a cooldown timer, otherwise little Timmy would be here just slamming the button every 15 seconds and it would just be non-stop going off, which would be very annoying. So yeah, that's basically everything I've got here to show you with the ride, Florian and Friends. I'm super chuffed with the vibes of this area, I have to say, especially the vibe like looking back in this direction where you've got the top spin, the station and Le Siège in the background. It's just all come together so nicely. And then I was thinking, I probably need another restaurant. We're now kind of the other side of the park from the larger restaurant on the main street. So I thought we probably needed a restaurant in this area. I wanted to do a kind of waterfront thing. So the idea here is that this is going to be, again, a kind of a Bavarian or Alpine sort of food hall. We'll have a big frontage in a classic, almost chalet style. And I wanted it to have an upstairs as well. And this at the front here, this will be a kind of a balcony area. And then obviously we'll have a large decking as well so that you can sit by the water if you want to. Obviously, it goes without saying, this is very much work in progress at the moment. But as I was saying earlier, I wanted the nice kind of flower bed gardening area to carry down through this area here as well. So we've got this series of steps down to this lower waterfront area here where we've got the beginnings of some nice flower beds and things coming in. Somewhere I need to work in, I might work in a ramp here maybe so that you've got an option to come down here with a wheelchair if you need to. And this gap here between the marsh area of the park around the dark ride, yeah, well, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure what this is going to be yet. I've got a few ideas in terms of themes and vibes, but I haven't exactly decided what this is going to be. This is fun over here. You can see where I was building the various animals for the for the ride, as well as the logo. I thought I might try and incorporate this classic clock piece into the area somewhere. I thought that could be another fun little interactive thing to have somewhere, but I haven't figured out exactly where that's going to go yet. Again, probably down here somewhere. But yeah, that's going to be the episode for today. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. I very much appreciate all the love and support on the channel. And a huge shout out to Frontier, of course, for giving me early access to Update 9. It was really fun to be able to bring that kind of early access content to the channel for the first time. So that's really exciting for the future. Hopefully there will be more of that. And yeah, you may or may not have seen, I did a community post the other day about possibly upping the frequency of videos on the channel. I haven't settled on any particular idea at the moment, or even if I'm going to do anything about it, but I was just thinking broadly because, generally speaking, I tend to wait until I have something like this to show you, which is a little bit more complete, and that means that we have these gaps of kind of several weeks between videos while I'm working on everything. So yeah, I don't know, there was an interesting mix of replies to that. A lot of people just saying like, yes, please give us more content. A lot of people saying they prefer the kind of see the finished product and they don't mind waiting. So in truth, I haven't exactly decided what I'm going to do yet. I did get some nice positive feedback on my Update 9 video, where it was kind of more of a real-time video where I was just sort of placing the arcade machines down, and it was very low-key, chill vibes. So I might do more of that. The other idea that I'm kind of mulling over is doing a sort of, I don't want to commit to doing something weekly, but more frequently doing a kind of just a time-lapse video where, say, I'm working on this station building, I record a time-lapse of this station. Before you get this video covering the entire area, maybe I just have a time-lapse only build video where you get a time-lapse and me chomping over it for 20 minutes or whatever. I might start doing something like that. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you're still here. But yeah, thank you so much for watching as always. I really appreciate the love and support on the channel, and I will catch you next time. Bye!